grant that you're working on as we speak. I don't think it's been turned in yet. And so the idea is to do that. And the board is all on board on doing something that revolves around history. And that's what the murals is mostly been about, is painting history, the last 200 years of our area. And so we think it's time that we do something that speaks to African American history and the part they played in the evolution here of our community, as well as the Underground Railroad. Find that all together, and we want to make sure that we get feedback from the community and invite the commission to be our lead on research, history. Robert Dafford, we have council a few times, and our committee's met at least a couple of times. So that kind of sets the tone for where we're at right now. So we're banking on this grant that we can move forward and do, prime mural with something left out. Robert Dapper is our muralist, has done the entire project since 1992, and as you know, we have nearly over, 2,600 millennial feet of mural now. It's amazing what I think it's done for our city. It's made a beautiful place. Main streets and flowers. It makes you proud to take people down there and show off, that area of our town. So, Robert, you would like to make some comments here, maybe get some issues as well, what you got an idea about, maybe?
I'm glad to meet you all. I haven't met you yet.
Gary Harrison.
So, the way that this has usually worked is the committee debates all during the year, but also during the winter time, and to figure out where they're going to get money and what we're going to spend next. So we've got that underway, for where we're going to get money and where we're going to spend this. And we're thinking about spreading out more than one. If you notice when you drive down the football, you'll see that there are individual pictures every 40 feet. There's an expansion joint every 40 feet, and it's got these little expansion cracks along with it. Mm-hmm. And we just chose that as a naturally occurring framework. So most of the murals cover about 40 feet.
Thank you.
But we think we want to spread out over two because you have so much material to cover with Black history, with your neighborhood, and with the Underground Railroad and possible, dignitaries and characters. And we'd like to cover everything we can. What usually happens is in the first meeting, everybody meets everybody.
This is on Facebook land and YouTube and all those watching. This is the muralist that's talking right now.
Just let's exchange ideas and let's find out what would work, what people are going to like, that would look good. And then generally I kind of sit on it for a couple of months during the winter, and we'll be in touch. We'll each have spokesmen. We talk to each other during the winter, send sketches.
Do we have a end date deadline to have this thing done?
So if the grant was awarded, we'll know in March. And I would say the funds would be available this summer. You could plan probably for sure September, but the funds, construction is able to begin, and as long as everything needs to be completed by October 31st of 2026. So there would actually be a couple of years, that it would take place.
So we have time.
Yes. Yeah, but the grant is supposed to be awarded in March. So we'll know then.
So do we need to
comes up with, if it's Underground Railroad, if it's, you know, community members or whatever, you know, however the mural is designed. There's a board, because, so this is like a large, historic, once in a lifetime grant.
Who's it for?
It's the Appalachian Community
Okay.
Grant. And the city is actually pursuing, riverfront development the entire riverfront. So it would also include, you can see that a new amphitheater with seating and all that. I did mention to her about the possibility of like naming the amphitheater, the Kathleen Battle Amphitheater, just because she's so perfect. Oh, thanks.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm streaming, so I
And
just want
Bruce
them to see it.
Leonard, so I think that might be a conversation we could facilitate if I don't know.
Access for trucks.
One of the, yeah, so, but it is a possibility
This
to,
section.
do if we get the grant. But, you know, included in riverfront development would be the amphitheater, learning and the dock. So we could have more riverboats come in, more recreational boats like Cabot Park and walk, you know, to downtown. It includes, Alexandria Point, new camping sites, and, some adventure play, kind of like non-traditional playground equipment as well. So that's just a part for the riverfront, but this particular subject mural would be near the amphitheater.
Could we also have an individual mural included for Kathleen Battle?
Yeah.
Yeah, if she's willing
If
to.
you're willing, yeah, I mean, I'm open to whatever the group comes up with, you know, I just think if the black community is underrepresented and, you know, as long as everyone gets on the same page and comes up with stuff.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So the grant for the mural that we're talking about here, as well as the riverfront redevelopment, that's from the governor's office, right? So that's a state grant. But currently there's a Appalachian Regional Commission grant that I'm part of. It's called the Appalachian Freedom Initiative, and we are researching and documenting 27 Underground Railroad sites in the tri-state. And then that's going to become the basis for a tourism promotional push with a website, with a printed material, and all this that will encourage people to go on the Appalachian Freedom Trail, which would be basically a tour of the tri-state area that highlights the Underground Railroad history in all of our communities. And so one of the markers that we're looking at to do for Portsmouth, again, there's 27 total, but there's 9 counties, so we don't get them all. But we'll have a fair number for the county. One of them would be for the riverfront. And the idea there is that the riverfront is actually a point where many freedom seekers first stepped onto free soil of the North. And in our research, what we found is that there actually were a number of escapes that involved steamboats. And so the freedom seeker actually arrived in Portsmouth on board a steamboat and then disembarked right here in Portsmouth and was placed on the Underground Railroad. So one idea that we're currently talking with the National Park Service about would be to put a marker somewhere in the riverfront area. And it could be in juxtaposition, to the mural as well.
Um, so in addition to that, we'll also be marking, the plans to mark, for example, Allen Chapel, because Allen Chapel AME Church, the oldest black church in the community or society in Portsmouth, going back to the 1830s. Also Pleasant Green Baptist Church, which was organized before emancipation in the early 1860s. And so we've been, with the help of Reverend Neely, actually, who's one of our outreach specialists, we've been conducting this research. And, the plan is to mark basically the black churches that were here, their role in the Underground Railroad, but also some additional sites associated with James Ashley, who was an Underground Railroad conductor. This is one of the stories I often tell, which surprises people because this history has been so neglected and hadn't been written up, and so we still know it. You know? But James Ashley is incredibly important, and his work on the Underground Railroad, he worked with African Americans in the community. So he's a good example of actually interracial cooperation that was really part of the Underground Railroad. So we're planning to mark some site associated with James Ashley. And currently, what we're looking at is actually the building that today is known as Caddies and Pines. Because it was on that corner where James Ashley lived when he was studying law. He eventually passed the bar here in Portsmouth, joined the South County Bar Association before he ultimately moved to Toledo and got elected to Congress. So we're planning to mark James Ashley. We're also planning to mark, yeah. Well,
What was the question?
yeah.
What was the
I just-
question?
we're gonna do our judge for James Ashley. Maybe there. Yeah, I mean,
There were a lot of people.
yeah.
I know we can't get pictures of these people, but in Greenlawn Cemetery, there are former slaves there. There's one I know, John Crenshaw, but I'd like to see, I could ask Brian, but there's a lady that knows all this. I could ask about those names, I'd like to see those names. It's incorporated somewhere here, and the slaves are buried here in Portsmouth.
A Greenlawn,
Recognize them.
Greenlawn is actually one of the places we're also considering marking, because of the African American Underground Railroad conductors, white Underground Railroad conductors, and abolitionists that are all buried up in Greenlawn. So you have Joseph Love, who's buried in the Center Circle. He was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. He fought in one of the colored infantry companies, volunteered, and fought in the Civil War. And he's buried in the Center Circle. But he was a cooperator. He worked with John J. Miner, who was a black barber down on 2nd Street. And John J. Miner barbershop is one of the other locations that we're looking at marking. And that's actually just a couple doors down from Caddies and Pines. That's where his barbershop is located. And the idea was that you could have like a walking tour, basically. So if somebody came to Portsmouth, they could check out the mural. They could then do a little walking tour of the sort of Bony Fiddle, that area. And we haven't decided yet where to mark necessarily the A&M Church, because it has moved over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we could go back to the original location, which was on Market Street, back where the Shawnee, there's an apartment complex there next to Valley Wholesale Foods. Right there in that corner is where the church was originally. Then it moved to 5th Street, not far from where St. Mary's is. So it's on that same on Fifth Street right there. And then it moved to 7th, about where the Kroger loading dock was. And then it moved to its current location. So, depending on what the congregation wants to do ultimately, I think that's where we'll mark it. But there were members of the church, right, that were Underground Railroad operators, like Joseph Love, John J. Miner, and his wife Martha. And you know, oftentimes I myself do this, I focus on John, but really Martha was as important and was a conductor as well. John J. Miner gave an interview once where he talked about Martha and himself helping people escape from Portsmouth. They rented call it a hack, but it'd be like getting an Uber, right? It's like they went and got they rented a car basically, or horse-drawn hack. And he said that Martha was in the back with the freedom seekers, and they were taking them up the toll road, which is US 23. So there will be additional sites marked in Portsmouth. Also, we're looking at a site near Franklin Furnace, which was another location that is totally verifiable. And then we're also looking maybe at some west side sites, so that we would at least get one on the west side and one on the east side, and then the city would have a number of locations. So ultimately, you see how this all works together, and this is part of what we're trying to leverage, right? Because we've already got funding for the marker. Another something for people to come see, right? And so in that sense, the Underground Railroad component makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
How are you able to incorporate Black Friday?
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough question.
I
I'll
didn't hear.
explain it. She asked, how do you incorporate the story of Black Friday into it? So for those who don't know the story of Black Friday, I'll try to summarize it as quickly as possible. So when Ohio was founded as a state, they early on adopted what were called the Black Laws, and they were discriminatory laws aimed at trying to discourage African Americans from coming and settling in Ohio. So the Black Laws required African Americans to register with the county clerk. They had to prove that they were free with free papers. They also were supposed to actually post a $500 bond, but that $500 bond had to be posted by 2 white Ohio residents. So it was really difficult to actually register. Okay. What that meant was that a lot of the residents, the black residents that came to Portsmouth, even if they were free, even if they had free papers, it didn't mean that they actually registered. So you had basically a lot of undocumented residents who were not legally allowed to work. They weren't really legally allowed to be living here. So about 1830, following copy, you could say what was done in Cincinnati about 2 years before, basically city authorities, after they were receiving complaints from the white population about the growing numbers of black residents, city authorities announced that they were going to now enforce the black laws because they weren't really being enforced. So it was Black Friday refers to the day when the black laws were enforced in Portsmouth. And it led to the expulsion of about 80 African Americans. The numbers, one number says about 80, so I'll say about 80. It was not the whole population. But it was close to probably the majority, you could say. Rather quickly, though, it's interesting, the black population came back or continued to grow because it was in 1837, 7 years later, that you had the formation of the A&E Church. So the A&E Church forms, about 7 years after that expulsion. But we also know that there were some folks that did register, and there were people that were never expelled. But nevertheless, it is definitely one of the darkest chapters in the community's history. Not necessarily something to celebrate, but something definitely to memorialize. The question would be, is that something that go in?
Yeah, it was just put on a quilt, and it was inside of the county, there was 3 other black groups. Like I said, the communities, the west side had one, Houston Hollow had one, Boston. I knew most of the other people from the west side, we knew some of Houston Hollow, Bonnie Hill. Yeah, but this was the one, there was other communities, of course, right, inside the county.
Well, in fact, Houston Hollow one, we're actually looking to mark Houston Hollow. That's where Joseph Love, who we mentioned, that's where Joseph Love lived. And that was really the first stop north of the city, was at Joseph Love's and a guy named Ken Lucas, another African American gentleman who lived up in Houston Hollow in that area. So, how you incorporate that, whether that is what you want to incorporate, that's what we're here to find out, what people are wanting to incorporate, so how to include it. So, there's a much longer history too that we can tap into, right? The long civil rights movement that Portsmouth has always been a part of. I think you can think of the Underground Railroad as really a civil rights movement. Because what it was about was resisting slavery and trying to ultimately bring an end to slavery. Sorry? That's right. That's right. So you take the story all the way up to the modern civil rights movement. There was definitely a local civil rights movement that succeeded in changing what segregation did exist in this town, helping bring it to an end through direct action at the Terrace Club. So when the Terrace Club was integrated, the integration of Greenland, it's true, but it was known as the Terrace Club when it was segregated. And so there's certainly dramatic images, there's the photograph from the protest, right, where you have the protesters in the pool, you have some of the white teenagers were supporting them, they got back in the water, they didn't get out, and then there's a photograph in the Daily Times paper that shows one of the white teenagers shaking hands with one of the protesters. So that's certainly a dramatic image. Yeah, powerful one showing interracial support for an end to segregation. And we need to go back before that. There's the whole history of Emancipation Day celebrations. There's a celebration of the 15th Amendment that was held at Allen Chapel back in 1871. This is something that I've been researching, and if I could go back in time, that would be a really awesome event to go to. It was in Allen Chapel. They were celebrating the ratification of the 15th Amendment, which granted African American men the right to vote. And you basically had all the old-time abolitionists, the Underground Railroad operators, both white and black, at that celebration. at Allen Chapel. There's one thing you can also think about is sort of seeing, could you depict, and again, it's the panels, right, that we're talking about here. So, right, it doesn't, you don't have to fit it all into one. You could come up with a couple different ones, right?
Robert, would you keep the same size consistently and just do a new one and a new one and
No.
half of one?
We
Or
don't
would
know
you
yet. There've
stretch
been,
it?
there've been many times that they came to me with a subject that had 15 different facets to it. And I have figured out ways, I've invented composition solutions to tell different stories all in one thing. And I already accepted that this mural is going to have many parts in it. It's hard to make it be as nice to me as one painting, one powerful painting to me is more moving than something. If you have 15, it looks like a comic book page, all broken up in panels, and it loses its strength and its interest. But sometimes that's the only way that you can include 15 facets of something. As we talk over the winter and figure out what are the important things to include. And I see a few photographs. I'm very visual. When I hear words, I see images. And when I see the actual photographs or images of people from that time, then I start seeing how they fit together. And I make rough sketches, and I'll send sketches up, and we'll all talk about what works, what doesn't work, if you like it or not. I have found throughout my entire life that once I get here and start with the layout we planned, we're going to discover something really great that we have not come across before. That always happens, and it causes me to change the composition a little bit as we go. At this time, I don't. You see how like there's an incense in the upper right-hand corner. You'll look at the murals, you'll see some of them have insets in top corners or across the bottom. Well, in fact, in the Civil War mural, at the bottom, there are insets around it that show battles that Portsmouth soldiers fought in. The artillery group was from here, Chickamauga. Well, there's in each corner, and then all the way across the bottom, there's a panel like that, where it's the only reference to the Underground Railroad. You can see the Kentucky side of the river in the moonlight, and on the Ohio side, there's people helping a boatload of escaped slaves into the woods. I was surprised by Drew's information. I thought that because it was a big city with lots of eyes looking, that people wouldn't be trying to cross here in the city. I thought they'd be out in the country. I was surprised to find out how many escaped slaves came through here and were shuttled under in the Underground Railroad to safe houses and not to get north of here. And I liked that depiction. My point being, if you look at the Civil War mural, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different segments. And that's how we'll have to treat this. We'll come up with a compositional design that looks good. Hopefully that has something to do with the subject, not just a white border dividing it up like that. But that'll evolve once we start. I mean, I'm already seeing lots of images and thinking of ways to put them together, but we have to have all the images and have some ideas that we think that we can spread out over. This can be bigger than one of the. It won't just be one kind of two. And there's still other characters. And how do you mix them? How do you get this character to fit with this scene next to these characters in that scene? We've got some different scenes here already. And I don't know yet what to include. Other other African American history murals I've painted in other cities, it keeps coming up that the barber shop was where
Mm-hmm.
community leaders would meet, talk
Mm-hmm.
about politics, the neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
business,
Mm-hmm.
money, and it
Barbara was
seems
a
to me that
psychologist and
that
everything
would be
else.
an important image to include, either in the barber shop and these characters talking to each other, about what's really happening. That's kind of in my head.
Speaking of the story, in our research that we found, this took place here in Portsmouth. There was, sometimes we think of the Underground Railroad as something that we're moving people quickly through so they don't get caught. In some cases, it was a little bit slower because they had forged free papers, for example, right? So they could actually kind of pass for being free, but they were still on the run. And one of the stories that we found was a freedom seeker from, I want to say he was from Alabama, but he came up the Mississippi on a riverboat, went up the Ohio. He got off in Louisville, and just to kind of look around, and then he quickly got back on the boat because he saw people that he recognized who had visited his enslavers' home down in Alabama. So he got back on the boat, then he gets to Cincinnati, and he said, well, I'll get off here. Gets off in Cincinnati, sees people, he recognizes, jumps back on the boat, hides, keeps going, gets off at Portsmouth, doesn't recognize people. And then he says he finds employment in the barbershop. And while he's just starting his job at the barbershop, this canal boat captain comes in and says, hey, my cook just absconded. That was the verb that was used. My cook absconded, and I'm taking my boat up the canal all the way to Cleveland, and I'm looking for a cook. This guy's like, hey, I'm not really a cook, but if I get a little help, I could do it. And so he hired her, and that was how he got further north. So he worked on the guy's canal boat. With Cleveland, he said that the guy was like, hey, I'd like to keep you on, right? And I'll pay you good money. And he said, no, I'm not going to be safe until I get to Canada. So he went from Cleveland to Canada. But the barbershop, it's definitely this nexus, for the black community, but also the information coming from the white community as well, right? That canal boat captain was I would say a white guy, and maybe that cook that absconded, maybe this is just the way that he operated, right? He helped African Americans get to Cleveland by working on his boat, right? But there's all sorts of dramatic, I think, images and stories that come from thinking about the barbershop and all that with John J. Minor. And with the barbershop, right, the barber is also shaving the white clientele as well. So a couple doors down from his barbershop is where Bill Kennedy, a white abolitionist and another Underground Railroad operator, had his feed store, right? So they're all really pretty close proximity. And then the AME Church, right, was just a couple blocks away. First Presbyterian was a site as well. The First Pres and from Second, so it's all those really close together, I would say. And if thinking about images of freedom seekers, another thing you can sort of imagine would be those that escaped through Portsmouth thanks to steamboats. So that was the idea of the landing here, is that we have 3 stories right now that we've been able to verify of freedom seekers escaping like coming to Portsmouth on board a steamboat and then disembarking right here, and then quickly being placed on the Underground Railroad, carried on to the next station. So, the landing right here is definitely a scene that could be a scene of dramatic moment, you might say, of disembarking, right, of the freedom seekers. And one of the stories is it's actually rather somewhat famous from Pittsburgh, African American conductor named Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown was coming down the Ohio on a steamboat from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. And somewhere upriver from Portsmouth, there was a young African American woman on board that was obviously a slave to a Southerner, his family who were on board the boat. And we had a moment where nobody else was there, and he asked her, "Are you a slave?" And she said, "Yes." He said, "Do you want to be free?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, just wait here." And the stewardess, so imagine this boat, like you've got African Americans working on the boat, black stewardess. He worked with her. They got her dressed up. I don't know where they got the clothing, but they dressed her up as a widow, all in black, the veil and all that. And then Thomas Brown snuck her off the boat and then onto the landing here in Portsmouth. And he said he pretty much dragged her up the landing and handed her off to, he described her as interested people. Is how he described them. But basically, you have to imagine the riverfront. There would have been African American workers that were there. The barber shops are just right off the landing, right? So he was able then to find a friendly African American face and hand her off quickly. Amazing story that has really never been published. We found it at the Afro-American National African American History Museum at Wilberforce here in Ohio. That's where we found that. So there's those types of stories I think that are dramatic and may work in some fashion.
Did Thomas Brown stay in Portsmouth?
Did he stay in Portsmouth? No, he went back to Pittsburgh. He was heavily involved in the black community in Pittsburgh, and was Martin Delaney, who edited the newspaper with Frederick Douglass. Martin Delaney was one of the leading African Americans in Pittsburgh, and Thomas Brown was active with him, and was recognized, as a prominent around railroad black politician from the pre-Civil War period.
There was a Brown, I don't know. I was thinking it was Thomas who had the building at Pig Iron Corner, which is around where you're working.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever lived
I failed to introduce Paul O'Neill properly. He's on our committee for this final end game regarding what's going to go on that piece of flood wall. And he's quite the historian and it's been a big help on this whole project. So,
I didn't grow up here.
yeah, he's a Pittsburgh guy.
I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, and I'm just amazed at the history. And it's just amazing what was here. And through the years, I've been here, well, it's 31 years I've been married and living in Portsmouth. I got interested in Portsmouth history and always heard there was no real documentation of Portsmouth being in the Underground Railroad. And then all of a sudden, Drew starts publishing stuff, and the Scioto Historical. And I asked him one time, well, I always heard it wasn't documented, and he said, well, I heard that too. But he found Wilbur Siebert, and about 1895 came down and interviewed people here and I think surrounding states too.
Yeah.
And it's like, there it is. It's been there all the time. But we didn't know.
Siebert's research. Siebert was a professor at Ohio State in the 1890s that did these interviews. And his whole collection probably about a decade ago was digitized and put on the internet. And so he interviewed John J. Miner, the Black Barber here, and without that interview, you really wouldn't know a lot. Because John, named all these different people that were cooperators with him, and including his wife, right? Including Marcus Will. So we're really living in a period where this history is being recovered because we have the power to now go back into the old newspapers. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. We can now do that with keyword searches, right? So I can find information about John J. Miner, like searching for his name, in these newspaper databases.
Me and Mrs. Marlowe were talking about Finley Street Church. I don't know when they were organized before the Civil War. I thought it was 1900, but it was another Methodist church, the CME, Color Methodist Christian Church. And in the 1970s, they joined the United Methodist Church, but I don't know at the time they did, but they had, I think, the first white pastor to pastor a black church. And of course, in Ohio, Reverend Ronald Hill, that did happen. I believe that he was a good person. He pastored a black church here. I think he was the first that I know of in modern time. I never heard my grandmother and grandfather say any other white pastor that ever pastored a black, predominantly black church here. But they received in the Color Methodist Episcopal Church.
Yeah, I don't know that the history that well, but I would think that they probably grew out of the original AME church.
Yeah, because the first church of the CME church is from my hometown. Yeah, first church was in Jackson. Yeah.
What was the existing or the current AME church built?
Well, the AME church was organized about 1837,
Mm-hmm.
and the current church structure, I think, dates to 1921.
But it's the same in time.
You have about something, you talked about the markers on this first phase that you're working on. And then did you say there'd be that particular, have its own functioning website to be able to go?
Right, it's going to be called the Appalachian Freedom Trail.
Yes.
And so there'll be a whole website for it. The larger grant is like $1.5 million. So they've hired a firm out of Huntington to do all the design work on that. But it'll be completely integrated so that the markers will have a QR code that would take you to the website.
Well, that's what I wanted to make sure that you're new. You mentioned the list of what slaves were buried in Green Lawn Cemetery, that type of thing. All of our 66 murals, there's no way on that kiosk or on the mural itself you can get all the information. So if you haven't downloaded the PMI, the Portsmouth Murals app, you need to do it because you go right into it and you got a QR code down there on all the kiosks, and you can just bring it up and you can very easily search, and it can take you to a link to something that relates to that mural that's on the west side or what, like the stone house. And so I could see where that would be just a natural for murals that we're going to hopefully be able to paint about Black history, that we can cover a lot of things through the app. So and it could take on a whole history of its own, just like we're doing with the other murals, and we've been working on that for years.
thought I could throw out some other ideas to see what you're thinking. If you go back, you really think about some of the local black heroes, right? Historical figures of significance. Let me report some. The first elected official, African American official, was a guy named John Q. Weaver, elected to the Portland City School Board. There's portraits of him. So, I mean, we know what he looked like, for example. So John Q. Weaver, and then Reverend Addison Haley. He was the second African American elected official, also to the school board. And in 1885, Addison Haley cast the deciding vote on the school board for the integration of Portland High School. So, Addison Haley is really a significant historical figure, and his son.
I know about him. So
His son was William Haley.
Addison Haley was the pastor
William
of
Haley
Pleasant Green
was
Baptist
the
Church for those
founding
who social
board
media.
president of the 14th Street Community Center. With his wife Jean, who was the first director. So I mean, there's also the history of the community center that might be worth considering. And then there's William Ross, the first city councilman, African American city councilman, elected in the 80s after the 1890s. There's also a guy named John Evans. John Evans was the organizer of Emancipation Day celebrations for a couple decades. And there are portraits of, I don't know if I've not seen a portrait of Addison Haley. But William Ross, there is a photographic portrait of William Ross. There's a portrait of John Evans. William and Jean Haley, we got photographs of them. And then there's Dr. James Forrest Scott, right? Elected coroner of Cider County. Certainly the first elected coroner in Ohio. Maybe even national.
Like the recent reports.
Yes. And going forward, I think of Kurt Gentry, not simply for his great athletics and professional sports career, but also his role as one of the protesters that brought him into segregation at Harrisburg. Right, and then Ted Wilbur, first black police chief. So I mean, there's a great cast of characters.
What was his name? First black police chief.
Ted Wilbur. And Ted was actually there at Terrace Club when the protest began. He was the one ultimately that was called in to have them arrested. We're getting up into more modern times, then I guess that way. But there's definitely a lot to think about. And maybe I've left out somebody.
There's a lot of unsung heroes.
Yes. Yeah, this started the conversation.
Well, and this is the beauty. There is time. We're not in a big hurry. So yes, there is time to feel it out in the community, and there's time to just mull it over and see. Yeah.
So,
I think it's a good start.
yeah.
A part I didn't mention is when we get started, the first thing we do, we have a crew, we rent a pressure washer, we have to go out there and water blast the walls. They've got 70 years of dirt, grease, and oil, dirt poop, and everything else. And we have to water blast it first. And then let that water dry back out. And then we coat it with a product called Thurasil. It's a concrete mix. It's a real fine grained Portland. This wall is really pretty rough. It's got lots of places where the aggregate shows through, or the rebar, or it's got chips and dents and scrapes. And so we smooth it off with this product Thurasil, which is also a waterproofer, and it also has an acrylic in it. And when that has to cure, and then our first coat for this industrial acrylic is basic color, and it bonds real well to the person. It doesn't peel unless there's water. I haven't noticed on these two rapids and almost all the other panels now they have cracks and water moves. When the sun heats up the wall, especially in summer, it draws up water. Those things go down 20, 30 feet below the street, those walls do. And the cracks do too. And when the sun heats it up, water gets drawn up. And then some of the water makes its way up to the surface, hits the paint film, and causes it to bubble. We have to deal with that a lot of panels every year. There's another thing underway is a huge maintenance. It's more than maintenance. It's going to be actually restoring the 30-year-old paintings. Some of them are starting to show wear. And, Chris said at the beginning that a whole lot, the biggest expense that the mural project has now every year is doing maintenance and retouching and re-cleaning up and re-clearing. They get washed every year. The entire thing, y'all might not have ever really noticed that. But every year they wash every panel for majority of those, repaints borders and repaints pieces that have weathering patterns. And I do some restoration. We're going to be starting a major restoration 30th birthday because it's time.
Yeah.
So some people in the state think it's important enough.
Thanks to Tracy Shear, the grant that we applied for, over 2 years ago now? And that's the thing that's scary about the bureaucracy. We applied in May of 22.
Yeah.
And we were told that grant, we're in a code-sharing grant with the city for some murals, would be awarded hopefully by the end of the year. All signs are good. We talked today about it, and if that goes through, then Robert's going to have a lot of work. We'll probably have to bring on some helpers, more helpers, and it'll be a combination of just fixing cracks and repairs. There's a lot of those things that Mike Doherty, the local artist, that basically is commercial painting, but he's worked with Robert enough. He knows what he can do and what he can't touch. Some of the skies and some of this three-dimensional stuff that Robert is just a genius at. He'll just say, "Hey, Chris, no, I can't touch that. I cannot restore that." And he'll do what he can do. And then Robert's going to come in and try to work on it. And now we've gotten behind with COVID and the Front Street bike path and the restoration there and all the renovations with the new asphalt. We were spending 15,000, maybe 20 a year on washing and maintenance, and now it's ballooned probably 30, 40,000 a year. And that's not counting a new mural, that's separate. And so we think we've got a couple $100,000 worth of work to do. And this grant finally comes through, then we want it to look fresh and vibrant again, just like it did the first day we finished the first one. So to most people, they look at them and they're still in awe. But the ones, us and the artists, when we looked at them, we said that needs to be done. So we're going to do that.
Robert, do you have any like recommendations on the concrete part under the floodwall stars? How to make it like attractive, but not it wouldn't necessarily have, I'll probably never be able to touch those floodwall stars. Um, but how to make the wall in general more attractive.
Now, I've thought about it over the years, but I never made a proposal. There are, there are some paints, which are more permanent. They're mineral silicate made by kind company, and they're not as tough as these paints we use, but the colors last forever. They're permanent mineral pigments, and they're made for if you want to have a 30-year paint job on your building, on concrete in particular. It was made to put permanent color into concrete, stone, brick, stucco, any kind of a cinder block, any kind of a mineral substrate like that. And with just buying in bulk, we could buy three colors and just roll it the whole thing. And you'd be done with it. It would look good for at least 20 years. The problem on the outside of the floor going through a steep, or they call it the inside. The riverside is inside. It gets sunlight just about 365 days a year. And it really gets blasted in the summer. It's really tough on the paint. Mineral paints I'm talking about, however, are anywhere from $250 to $300 a gallon. And you can't buy less than a gallon. It's out of reach of our budget. We got used to everybody having 25 gallons of paint to do a mural. And what's that from? That's well, that's right now. I'm getting them for it depends. 60 to 70.
It's all going up.
Oh yeah. Some of it's 80 now. It retails for 125. The paint that we've been using it's called DTM direct to metal. It's an industrial grade acrylic that is real tough. But you cannot get permanent pigments in them. They use exactly the same commercial dyes, all house paint, all building paint. It's all the same cheap commercial dyes. They're not pigments. You should know that when you buy paint. When they tell you what color do you want in your paint, you're talking about dyes. You're not talking about pigments. Pigmented paints cost so much that this hadn't been feasible to use them. I've figured out how to combine some of the reds and some of the yellows. So because reds and yellows are down to 5 years for most things. And the overall picture kind of looks tired after about 10 years of sun. Most of these have been on the north side of the wall, most of this country, and they've had an extraordinary life.
It's held up very well.
The paint itself is held up too. So when I'm working outside, I usually tend to use colors that are not going to fade as fast. But we'll see how this.
There's several challenges, Tracy, on the rest of the flood wall. One is there's a large, quite a bit of that length is taller. The street goes down. Where we're working here on this easterly end, the floodwaters, even when they're about ready to close the gates, there's no water there. So a lot of that gets waterlogged. Also, if you was to work on a project there, you block that street. It's very narrow. Is this new construction, if we get this however many million it is it going to widen that any?
I'm not sure if it'll widen it.
You think they'll lose that parking?
I think that the traffic probably need to be closed during construction anyway, because there'll be, there's such a short time period to get everything completed that, it would just make sense to close it off to the public during construction.
What is it, like 16 million or something?
It was 500 million.
500 million?
For the entire grant.
And we'll do, how many counties will go together?
Well, they're not going to get, okay, so we're partnering with Lawrence County, and there's many other counties included with this. There's 32 counties total that are Ohio, Appalachia, who are eligible.
But anyway, that's part of the challenge is they're gonna deteriorate more quickly. And so unless the Portsmouth Mural Board can find a way that we can have a, a fund in perpetuity, we're scared about what the costs are gonna be in
Well, I
15 years.
kind of thought, like, even if it was something not as detailed, but more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
You know, the city, maintain that section.
No pressure,
No
no
pressure,
pressure.
Charlotte.
Right, well, that's here too, yeah.
So, you wouldn't have to be a professional artist to do some basic, waves or something, right?
Yeah, anything. Yeah, it wouldn't have to be because I know, I want to leave the murals at the historical murals to you guys, but just to make the floodwalk stars more, I mean, that's a huge development project, and I feel like just having that concrete there.
It'd be great to have
Yeah.
a thing.
Well, the art commission has been charged with redoing the floodwall stars to add it. So there's going to be, which I did want to let everyone know too. It hasn't really been advertised yet, but from January through May, there's going to be application available on the city's website that you can submit names, and we're going to start doing the flood wall stars again. And I am heading the art commission now, so it's falling on my shoulders. And actually, I sent an email today to Mike Doherty just to see if we could start getting some quotes on like what it would take. We want to restore all of the flood wall stars, and then we will be adding to them next spring as well. So I need to get a budget because this commission has no budget. So I'm charged with finding out. But I feel like this meeting's kind of been hijacked from the original mission, and I really want to bring it back to the original reason why we're all here. For these panels, because I really feel very strongly this is important and they've been left out. This history's been left out of the history representation of the panels. So,
Well, Robert knows firsthand about Paducah and several of the cities he's painted murals in all over the world, that we're going to have more maintenance on these murals here facing the river, the true south. So we know that, and we've got to try to build that into the budget to, make sure we keep it clear coated and we don't want something to look good in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But so many times you find the money to do something, but then there's never money to follow to keep it maintained. So that's the problem.
that's a big struggle. Yeah, public art, that's one of the biggest issues with public art is that people think, well, it's going to cost so many thousands of dollars, tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to get public art. But there's so much maintenance and conservation that goes into two-dimensional and three-dimensional public art. And so it really becomes cost prohibitive. And this is why a lot of cities have turned to temporary public art. And so you'll see things up for 6 months or maybe a year, and then it's taken down again. And which is a whole different way to think about public art and charging your spaces up with public art. Yeah.
Well, it's been certainly nice meeting with everybody, and I've learned a lot just listening to Dr. White, Robert, with their ideas, and everybody that's chimed in tonight.
I'm really excited about this. I think this is going to be good.
Yeah, so, like, this is really just the beginning, of the conversation, and, it might be a good idea to reconvene in about a month. And, so folks can think about it and talk with other folks in the community about it. And then, if you want to invite other people to come back, when we have our next meeting, I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
And then Robert, I guess we'll be back maybe down in Louisiana, but we can get in somehow.
The end of next month, a month from now will be around Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, certainly not going to be around Thanksgiving exactly, so maybe in early December.
Oh, depends. We're gonna get fed. I'll be here.
You can see that?
So, that's right.
We tried.
So, one thing we had mentioned was naming the amphitheater and possibly having a dedicated mural after the battle. What's the best way to contact her? Or how
She has family
She
that
still has
she still has family that's local.
does she?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Who would be the best person
This is the
to?
best contact person for the Kathleen.
Probably.
Lee. She has a sister that lives in Lee.
Yes.
Married named Lee Perry. And she's got a brother. I've got Steve. Yeah,
Grady.
And Grady. I'm not thinking, yeah.
Reagan House right
Johnson. Johnny was the.
So y'all are welcome to take these photos if you want to take them back with you and share with folks. Start a conversation. Feel free to take any of these with you. I have everybody's email that's here. We did have a signage sheet going around. I didn't put my email. You got one.
You got it.
Yeah, I got yours. Yeah, if you could put your, maybe pass that back around, get some emails, and then we'll make sure everybody gets the invitation.
Well, thank you for the
See that?
invite. It was, yeah, sounds like it's, I'm glad to hear it's not something that's been done in the next 30 days. I do get too many of those things. When you want it done? Yesterday.